All right, my lovies, this is Christina with Karma's Eye Psychic LLC here on Universal Spirit Podcast. We are in our 7th season talking about what happens after you come out as spiritual. If you didn't catch the last episode, well, the first episode of the season, Coming Out as Spiritual, I would suggest you go listen to that. We're just following up on the last episode, talking about what happens after, and the more of the mood is losing your social circle. Something that seems to follow right after you come out as spiritual. You don't have to always be, into witchcraft or anything super like that, but you could be more into yoga, meditation, and just, about aligning chakras, that you are looking towards something more spiritual rather than religious. And you can't help but notice right after you do that full throttle, you come out full throttle, that your social circle begins to change fairly quickly. Either you start to see something different with your social circle, or they start to see something different in you. Either way, it's really a battle of who's going to react first. Who's going to say something first? Who's going to move closer or away first? So this is just a short talk about losing your social circle, especially if you were part of a mainstream culture, mainstream religion, or mainstream way of life. Even when it comes to your geographic culture, coming from certain neighborhoods or certain states or whichever, even that comes with some type of backlash of losing a social circle, when you decide that you not only know that you're different from it, but you decide consciously to be different from it. Okay, so one of the first things that happens when you come out as spiritual is that you're usually in the middle of a conversation where people are talking about something religious, and people would assume that you would agree with them because they're so used to knowing you to be, in agreement or be on their side about it, and then you tend to disagree, or you say, hey, you know what, I'm not so religious anymore. I'm not really leaning toward a religious standpoint. I see things now more at a spiritual standpoint. So I do not agree with, what you were saying, or I've never agreed with what you were saying, and I've never seen so-and-so this way. And then what happens? The person that is speaking or the people that are around you get really flustered. Right? They get so surprised, they get even disappointed, and some of them react with the whole, but you were raised that way, or they react with, I've never known you to say that. I've never known you to think that. It's kind of like they tell on themselves, because the truth is they just never really knew you. And that really is the kicker when you come out as spiritual, is that the people around you did not actually know you very well. They made assumptions. They assumed that you went along with the crowd, and you probably did go along with the crowd. We've all done that. But at some point, it stops becoming, comfortable, and then it's kind of like, hey, I want to do my thing. I think it's better that I do this, for myself spiritually, and religion can do what it wants without me, right? You now feel like you were not a part of anything anymore. Like you feel very disconnected to the people around you who made this assumption about you that you would always be there, or you would always agree, or you would always be on board with what they were doing. So now that you're telling them that you're not, then they're upset, they're flustered, they're confused, they're disappointed. Now you got to deal with all these emotions from these people that you love, and these people that you care about, and these people that you've built relationships with, right? It could be family, friends, co-workers. It could be even just, associates that are so used to seeing you being normal around town, dressing like everyone else. And next thing you know, you come out as spiritual and you want to do your own thing, and you want to express yourself completely differently. Okay. You are probably spending more time alone at this time because of trying to avoid those reactions from everyone, because sometimes you have a disagreement and then it's kind of like not over. It's kind of like there's always a follow-up, right? It's kind of like you see them again later, and that's the only thing they can remember about you, that day, is that you disagree with them and they learned something about you that they did not know. at this stage of losing your social circle, losing friends or family, you get to the point where it's kind of like you might not even be ready to explain yourself. You might not be ready to explain yourself. Just say, hey, I just don't agree with that. It doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay. And that's basically all you can say. You might not be able to verbalize it quite just yet, especially when everybody is so, confused and everyone is so surprised, and yet you are caught in the middle of trying to explain yourself and you don't have much practice at it at all. Another thing that happens when you come out as spiritual, especially people who are leaning toward the consciousness lifestyle, right? You start to notice how negative your social circle was or is. You try your best to be more grateful, have more gratitude. You might be leaning toward, contacting and, interacting with ancestors and spirits in your own spirit and meditating. And you realize that your social circle has nothing to do with that. In fact, you feel as though your social circle is on a very, very low vibration, and wondering how you were able to stay in that for a long period of time. Most of the time it happens when we are in these circles for years and years and years, and pulling yourself out of it almost feels like you have an outer body experience, so to speak. Okay. So then when you realize that the people in your circle are very negative or very self-deprecating, or, having really bad habits that are kind of causing the problems that they complain about. And then the first instinct that you have is to what? Is to help them, right? It's kind of like, hey, Stephanie, if you look at it this way, in a more positive way, it'll most likely work out for you a little bit better. Or if you're just like, hey, Brian, if you didn't complain so much, you might be able to bring more positivity towards you, just as a general example, right? And then they look at you like, oh, what is wrong with you? And then they continue to go off on their negative, rant or whatever it is. Now, keep in mind, you're not trying to change anyone, right? You're not even trying to force people to see your point of view at this point, because it can be very frustrating. But then you start to realize that it's really not up to you to teach them how to find this nirvana that you have recently found. It's really up to them to take it upon themselves, just like you did, to find it for themselves. And for you to watch can be very difficult. And then it gets to the point, what happens, right? You just spend less and less time with them. You don't call your parents as much, or you don't call your friends as much, and you don't go out as much as you used to. You are now, going within and finding all these validating things from within yourself, because now you understand the spiritual connection you have with the universe. You don't really need these external things anymore, right? You will find yourself to stop using substances. You'll stop, interacting as much. You might even stop going, frequenting places that you used to go to a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a bar or anything, but it could be, just even a grocery store. It's kind of like, oh, I know I'm going to encounter drama. I'm just not going to go in there anymore. I'll just find an alternative. And then either taking the longer way, driving, you might find that driving the long way makes you happier, and you're more apt to doing what makes you happy. So now you are cutting yourself off from these situations and people that have been draining and lowering your vibration. Slowly at it, you start to realize within 6 months of coming out as spiritual that everything and everyone around you has changed. One of the most challenging things to do when changing your circle after coming out as spiritual is when you deeply love the people that you are around. And there's nothing wrong, obviously, with loving anyone. But when you realize that they are, in fact, not, catering to their, highest good by the words that they say or the things that they're doing or the drama they keep ending up in, and you no longer want to be part of it, and you still love them very much. You feel as though you're turning your back on them, so to speak. But you're not turning your back on them. What you're doing is that you're releasing them back, as they always are, in the hands of the universe for them to find their own way. When they do reach out to you and say, hey, I notice you haven't been around lately. Is this something I said? Is it something I did? At that point, for most spiritual people, not all of us, some of us are very, can be very passive about explaining ourselves. That like, hey, I just noticed that, we do a lot of things that aren't so positive, and it doesn't, result in anything positive. We're trying to do these things, but we keep complaining. We keep, engaging in drama. We keep getting ourselves into these situations, and it's kind of like we're hitting a brick wall and we're not really going anywhere. We're not getting any smarter. We're not getting any more successful. We're not even getting any happier. So I'm, picking a path where I just need to find my happiness, or continue and maintain my happiness. And unfortunately, right now, it's not anything that you are doing. I would really like it that you would not be so negative and so immersed in drama and, just covered in human crud. I really would like it for you to, not only understand why I haven't been around, but maybe even try it for yourself, because I love you so much. It seems as though what I could be saying or what I could be doing always seems to be misunderstood to you. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just, staying away, so often. Like I'm not going to come over so often. I'll still come by to see you, but I need to protect, my own energy, and my own aura, but before I become in the presence of you, because you are so, determined to be in these negative situations, and I am no longer determined to be in these negative situations, and I would need you wholeheartedly to understand that, and understand that I still very much wholeheartedly love you. It's just right now our paths are splitting. We're not on the same path anymore, but from afar I will still be very much involved. Probably not physically, but definitely in spirit be involved. Because what ends up happening is everyone in your life becomes behind this window. It's like you have a better look at them, a better view of them after you have centered yourself, aligned your chakras, and understand what makes you happy, and you've been executing that plan for your happiness, and your happiness is growing and growing, and it's very successful. Everyone becomes behind this glass wall. Now you start to look at your parents or your family or your friends or your associates or your boss or whoever you allow in your life, your significant other, and you're saying to yourself, how did I get myself in this situation that is negative? Not to say that everyone in your life is negative. I mean the people that you notice you spend less time with because they're negative. They become behind a glass wall, and then now you're just kind of like, okay, like what made me get involved with that person? This becomes a huge, huge important time of self-reflection as to what was my need at the time, what was my goal at the time, what kind of place was I in at the time to have attracted that person. What was it about me that made that person come into my life? Because obviously I'm going to take responsibility for basically everyone in my life. So I need to know exactly why I did what I did to bring this negative person in, and heal that, and heal whatever it is that they saw that they could take advantage of, or that they could exploit, or they felt like they didn't need to go get any better because I myself, did not heal the same part that they keep refusing to heal. So it becomes a huge self-reflective time when you start to see how you brought these people into your life. Low self-esteem, self-doubt, just fear of a lot of things, fear of being judged, or fear of not being perfect. People do have this wanting to be perfect, thing, and they attract all kinds of people who do the same thing, and they put up a lot of facades, and you notice you got a lot of fake friends all of a sudden, so it is not right for us to judge the person. It's really us spiritual people who need to take responsibility for allowing them to be in our lives. Now, can you still love them? Absolutely. Even if you have a fake friend, just be like, I still love that person. Obviously, I have love in my heart and understanding, the being that I am. Love exists. So I love that person regardless of them, doing what I think they should be doing. But I love them, and I'm very grateful that they even still exist. And what happens the most is that when your social circle begins to deteriorate, because your social circle will always deteriorate first before it gets bigger, or, a regular circle of new people, it'll always deteriorate first. It's one common denominator I see across all of my, learning and teaching and just experiences and the things that I've researched and read. The circle always gets smaller first. Right? It's kind of like people just think you're being weird, and they just kind of like, okay, we don't talk to her anymore. We'll talk to her whenever she feels like it, whenever we are feeling it, whenever we can align. Other than that, we're just going to go our separate ways for now, and you notice that you start to enjoy spending that time alone. It feels a lot better than it used to be, because some of us bring a lot of people into our lives because in fear of ever being alone with ourselves, because, ever feeling that loneliness, and then once you, advance, and once you expand, you start to realize that loneliness is not loneliness. It's just being alone, which is actually very positive, very good, and it's something that we should do a little bit more often, especially when we want to heal. Healing then becomes one of your priorities. You start to try to find everything in your life to heal it, because what you don't want to do is go down another negative path. You want to stay on the positive path that you're on. Now, is every spiritual path a positive 100% of the time? Absolutely not. That would not be true. However, what it is you're striving to have that peace, to have the peace in everything you do, and have that peace in anything that happens and anything that comes your way. Not to say that you'll have all the answers all the time, but it's more like you adopted that way of being spiritual because you understand things happen for a reason. Things can happen because I created them. If I created them, then I can fix them. It gives you that push-pull of control and letting go. It gives you that nice balance of the universe being in control and then you being in control. It's like you have this new relationship with the universe now, and the relationships with people now have started to deteriorate. You don't see them as often, and sometimes you don't see them again. Some of them can end bitterly. The people might think that you're acting like you're trying to be better than them. Some of it can actually end graciously, and he will just say, hey, you know what, I'm really glad that you finally found something that makes you happy. And if I can't be involved in that, and they willfully respect that, and they give you the space, which is a rare thing, but it does happen. We do have different experiences when it comes to when we branch off after, finding ourselves, so to speak. Are you gonna miss your social circle? Yes, absolutely. You're a human being and you have emotions. And yes, you will miss most of the people. Sometimes you miss them all. Sometimes you miss none of them some of the time, and then all of them, all the time, or whichever, but you will go through that. I miss, so-and-so and so-and-so. I miss the friends that I had. We had good times or whatever, but it's more like you are more secure in the decision that you made. It's almost like you've won some type of, immortality, so to speak, where it's kind of like you feel or you'll live forever now that I've gotten all this gunk off of me. Do you always separate from people that have your best interest at heart? Sometimes you do, because sometimes their best interest for you and your best interest don't align up. Some people believe that if you're religious, that's the best thing for you because that's what they know. That's all they know. And then when you exercise something different from what they know, it then does, retract back on them emotionally, confusion, sometimes even resentment, and then they start thinking like, oh, I hope something bad happens to you because I'm trying to help you. Of course, they're trying to help you from their level of understanding. But once you've gotten past their level of understanding, you start to understand that they are not only very lesser evolved than you, okay, but they have no intention of trying to understand you that well, because if they had intention to understand you that well, they would then try to come up to your level to really get a good idea how to understand you better. This also applies to the workplace when you come out as spiritual, and you might start changing the way you dress if you're able to, the way you wear makeup or the way you wear your jewelry, the way your desk may look, people not understanding like, your gems and stones and, your bamboos or whatever it is that you're doing. Also, not so much engaging in gossip anymore, probably no longer hating your boss. You're probably just like, you know what, he's doing the best he can, doing the best she can, And I just have to be grateful that, one, I still have my job, that I'm doing the best that I can. And then you become in alignment so much where, like, oh, now you're like the weird person at work or something. But even that, you're still okay with that. You're kind of like, I can be the weird person. I would really love it for you to come to a point where you can heal yourself and not even have those thoughts. So what are your thoughts about this, lovies? Tell me exactly what happened with you when you decided you were going to be, spiritual. Now, a lot of spiritual cultures would consider themselves to be semi sort of religious. But if you want to include that in this definition, then you go right ahead. I would like to know exactly how, when you came out as spiritual, what were the things that followed? What did you lose any friends? Did you lose any family? Becoming out spiritual is almost like a political movement. It's like you're either on one side or the other side, and sometimes people just ignore you entirely, or people flock to you. And have you found your tribe? Because we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So I've been Christina with Karma's Eye Psychic LLC here on Universal Spirit Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will be back next week. Love you.